Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jeremy Leffler. I work in the policy office at the National Science Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another session of our virtual grants conference. And I'm now pleased to introduce this session, which will cover an update from our NSF Division of Financial Management. And this session is being presented by Dorothy Battle and Justin Pohl.
Good afternoon and welcome to our afternoon session, where we will be discussing important information concerning NSF's post-award financial processes. I would like to first introduce the speakers for today's session. I am Justin Pohl, and I am the section chief for our Payments and Outreach section. I'm here today with Dorothy Battle, who is one of our grant accountants and a colleague of mine in the section. We have a diverse agenda today that hopefully will be engaging to both new and veteran NSF grantees. Today, we will highlight some key areas across both the operations and monitoring sections of our team, update the community on some recent internal agency process and system improvements, and finally spotlight some recent innovations and opportunities for future engagement. I'd like to share a bit about our organization and mission. Some of our longer standing grantees may have known us previously as the Cash Management Branch. Our branch is under the Division of Financial Management, which sits under the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management, led by NSF's Chief Financial Officer. Our organization is responsible for overseeing NSF's payment operations, which includes not only grants, but also contracts, travel-related payments, and other administrative payments across NSF. We also perform financial outreach and engagement with our grantee community and post-award financial monitoring activities, for which we work closely with other divisions under the BFA organization. The Awardee Cash Management Service is our in-house grants payment system. Some of you may use ACMS in addition to other government-wide grant payment systems, such as HHS's Payment Management System, or PMS, or Treasury's ASAP. ACMS is a custom system and has been in operation for 10 years now. One of the advantages of ACMS that our grantees hopefully enjoy is that it requires disbursement requests at the individual award level, rather than drawing down a summary advance payment and reporting award level expenditures at a later time, which is how our previous process had worked. As a result, we have eliminated the collection of the SF 425 Federal Financial Report, but there are a few annual reporting initiatives that we require from our community to supplement some missing pieces. Specifically, our annual grant accrual validation, which typically kicks off in Q1 of the fiscal year, and our program income reporting, which we will touch on later in the presentation. For a comprehensive overview of key topics related to grant payment operations and monitoring, we would like to refer you to check out our Payments and Analytics branch website for our frequently asked questions document. Our team puts a lot of work into grooming this FAQ annually as our business evolves, and we even use it internally as a one-stop shop reference for common inquiries that we receive from our financial research community. We just released our FY 2023 version of the FAQ, which is available on our website, so I encourage you all to download it, print it out, or bookmark the link, which doesn't change with the annual updates. Topics cover a wide range, including ACMS and general cash management topics, the critical dates related to our year-end and canceling appropriation impacts, common program income reporting questions, questions around our other monitoring activities, and also program-specific questions related to programs such as SBAR and our postdoctoral fellowships. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Dorothy.
Thank you, Justin. Good afternoon. Next, I'm going to take a deeper dive into the payment operations side of our portfolio. We have a team of 5 specialists dedicated to business support and payment processing who are assigned NSF grantees based on a portfolio of states. Your dedicated points of contact can be found on our external NSF PAB website, linked on the previous slide in the handout. I encourage you to reach out to them for any questions that you might have about payments, refunds, or other post-award financial processes. This process flow shows our grant payment processes at a high level and how your ACMS drawdowns are processed daily. The cutoff for our daily payment schedule is 8 p.m. EST. So please be mindful of this cutoff when preparing your request. The request must be certified to be scheduled for next day processing. The following business day, our payment specialists review ACMS drawdowns from the previous night batch process and prepares a payment schedule to transmit to the Department of Treasury. Disbursements are typically scheduled the next business day, at which time Treasury will process the requested disbursements to our grantees. One exception to this 2 business day end-to-end cycle is when we have large dollar payment schedules, that is, exceeding $50 million in payments for a given day. To meet Treasury cash forecasting requirements, the payments for large dollar schedules are dispersed 2 business days after transmission rather than 1. This scenario is fairly infrequent throughout the fiscal year, but more common in peak periods such as our fourth quarter and year-end closeout payment rush, usually in August and September and June, which is when many of our grantees' fiscal year ends. When requesting cash during these times, please account for this extra business day of processing in your expectations. On the next slide, I will talk about some best practices to minimize delays in receiving funds. There are a few common reasons that could either cause delays in receiving payment or receiving less funds than expected. They are summarized here, and I will talk about them more on the subsequent slide. Some transactions require review and approval by a PAB payment specialist before the transaction can be processed. This additional review layer can add time required to process your request and may delay payment. You can avoid this review by not making unnecessary entries in the remarks field of your transaction, which is one of the triggers for NSF review. The remarks field should only be used for communicating items directly to NSF staff. If you wish to leave notes to help your organization identify the purpose of the transaction, please utilize the internal comments field instead. The use of the internal comments field will not cause any delays in processing. In some instances, your payment request may be delayed due to an expired or inactive SAM registration. Please be sure to maintain an active and up-to-date SAM registration to avoid any delays of this sort. How do I add and update banking data? NSF disperse funds to your organization's bank account based on the banking information submitted to the System for Award Management. Before requesting a payment transaction, ensure your organization's SAM registration is active and up to date, including the banking data. NSF new accounting system stops payments to any awardee with an expired or invalid SAM registration. So, why was the payment I received less than what I had requested? In some instances, your payment request will only be partially accepted, which means one or more awards for which payment was requested against failed to post to our financial system. More information can be found regarding the particular awards that had issue in an error message contained on the transaction in ACMS, and by contacting your assigned payment specialist on our website. Now I have some exciting news that will be encouraging to our recipients who have experienced TOP in the past. We recently received a waiver for our NSF grants program from TOPS from the Department of Treasury. We implemented this change for grants and cooperative agreements in late August 2022. So in FY22, NSF requested that its award payments related to financial assistance awards, grants, and cooperative agreements be exempted from TOP offset. NSF received approval from the Department of Treasury, and then NSF and Treasury worked to implement the exemption in August 2022. So future award-related payments will no longer be impacted by TOP offset. Next, I'm going to talk a bit about the post-award adjustment process. 120 days after the end of the period of performance on your award, NSF executes what's called a financial closeout process. This is automated and deobligates the remaining funds from the award, meaning it sweeps the remaining balance and also reduces the award by the amount of the remaining balance, such that the award amount equals the expended amount. After this 120-day closeout, NSF grantees have an additional 14 months to submit an upward adjustment or an additional payment request after the financial closeout. This additional payment request is limited to the amount of the remaining balance that was swept at financial closeout. There is a common misconception on whether a financially closed award needs to be reopened to process additional reimbursements, or whether an adjustment request will suffice. Here's a case study to benchmark your current knowledge of this scenario. So an adjustment is to a financially closed award are permitted when reimbursement for expenses incurred during the award project period are required. A request to reopen and extend the award is only required when new spending is required. So there are some limitations for adjustments to closed award. Payment transaction totals submitted via ACMS must be equal to or greater than 0. This means your institution must offset the return against an available award that requires payment. If such an award is not available, the funds must be returned either through pay.gov or via check. Furthermore, there are these additional restrictions enforced by the system. Adjustments against an individual closed award must currently be greater than or equal to $1. Upward adjustments via ACMS are available for 14 months after the award is financially closed, or in some cases, a shorter period if the funding appropriation cancels prior to the end of the 14-month period. In most cases, this would translate to 18 months past the end date of the award period of performance. Downwards adjustments via ACMS are available until the funding appropriation cancels. The eligibility check will indicate whether the award is eligible on the adjustment form of the payment transaction in ACMS. We've talked a lot about money going out of NSF, but what about money coming in? If your organization needs to remit funds to NSF due to positive cash on hand balance, the remittance can be completed in one of 3 ways: using ACMS, pay.gov, or by check. Within ACMS, as long as your overall payment request is net positive, you can submit a credit against an award as an offset to the current payment request. We cannot accept a net negative request through NSF across one or more awards. If ACMS is no longer an option for a particular award, for instance, the grantee does not have another open award to offset the credit against, submitting remittances to NSF online through pay.gov is strongly preferred. This allows remitters to make secure electronic payments and decreases the processing time associated with receiving and processing a paper check. Check is our least preferred method. We experience significant delays in processing manual checks during the pandemic and still occasionally experience delays. Further, there is an NSF and government-wide shift to reduce paper checks as much as possible. We have received some personal feedback from some grantees on constraints that prevent their organization from using pay.gov. For example, if your organization is part of a state-managed treasury that does not allow ACH debit into your central bank account. We have been collaborating with the U.S. Department of Treasury on this specific scenario and how we can accommodate this common requirement within our efforts to reduce check volume. There are some newer platforms that have been successful in utilizing with some of their customers that have similar constraints, such as large financial services institutions. Our team has recently launched a small pilot to test the feasibility of this platform for our customers. Our team is currently working with a couple of institutions who are frequent remitters by check or had indicated to us their inability to use pay.gov. Once we have completed the pilot, we are hopeful to be able to roll this option out to all those who are interested in using this new option. If you are using pay.gov for the first time, you must contact your financial institution to whitelist NSF account to debit the remittance, which often needs special permissions depending on the configuration of the account. This specific detail is on this slide and also in our grant FAQs. Next, I'm going to talk about canceling appropriation and some year-end critical dates. NSF appropriations must comply with Public Law 101-510, requiring all federal agencies to close fixed year appropriation accounts and cancel any remaining balances by September 30th of the 5th year after the period of availability. For most appropriations, the period of availability is a 2 fiscal year period, not necessarily 24 months. For fiscal year end 2023, this means that any unspent appropriations from fiscal year 2017, which covers the period October 1, 2016 through September 30th, 2017, will be canceled by September 30th, 2023. So how will you know which awards will have their appropriations canceled this year? When reviewing your awards in ACMS, you can easily identify those awards because there will be a red flag next to the award number as shown here. Also, beginning in January, we will send email notifications to institutions that have awards with canceling funds. These emails continue monthly through September or until the award has been closed or fully liquidated. The award cash management service will be temporarily unavailable around 4 to 5 business days prior to the end of the fiscal year. Awardee organizations will not have access to the ACMS payment process during this period. This will allow NSF to finalize payments and reconcile its general ledger accounts. Our goal is to have ACMS available beginning on October 1. No-cost extensions past the canceling date will not be approved. If the award has multiple appropriations, the end date may be granted past the canceling date. However, only those funds not impacted by the canceling appropriation will remain available. Usually, an institution is allowed 120 days to complete final financial activity prior to the award financial closing. This means that an institution has up to 120 days to correct errors, post charges that were incurred before the end date, and address other closeout requirements, such as financial project reports. All payment activity must be completed by September 25th, 2023 for awards whose appropriations are canceling. Any remaining funds for the award after that date belonging to the impacted funding appropriation will be deobligated and returned to the Department of Treasury. Other non-financial reporting deadlines are not impacted. Let's take a look at a hypothetical scenario. So the university has award 1712334 with funds obligated with 2017 appropriation. Subsequent funding was received in fiscal year 2020. The university receives a no-cost extension, which extends the award through May 31st, 2024. During the spring of 2023, the university receives a letter from NSF, which tells them that they have canceling funds, which will cancel on September 30th, 2023. True or false? The university can ignore the canceling funds email. The payment and analytic branch must have made a mistake in sending us this notice. And the answer is false. The award received a no-cost extension past the canceling funds date due to the award having received additional supplemental funding from a later appropriation year. The later funds are not canceled. However, the letter from PAB needs to be addressed as there are unliquidated funds on that award from the original funding year that will be canceled. So let's take a further look at this example. Let's say your organization received $250,000 upfront. The supplement was a small amount of $25,000. The PI requested a no-cost extension because they had $100,000 remaining. The no-cost extension gets approved and the PI might assume, I have until May 31st, 2024 to spend my remaining $100,000. In this scenario, they would only have until September 30th of 2023 to spend $75,000 of that remaining $100,000. After September 30th, the only portion that would remain available for the PI would be the supplement of $25,000. This is a very common example that we have experienced every year, and know this can be quite surprising to the PI when they learn about this. This is why it is so important to communicate this information in numerous notifications to your organization. It is important not to ignore these notifications and to be that liaison and communicate with your PI. If you have questions, please ask your payment specialist and we'll be happy to explain. Here is another look at the scenario. This illustrates the life cycle of the appropriation. The 2017 funds were open and available for the first 2 years. We had 5 years to liquidate them. The supplement had an open availability from 2020 to 2021, and then we have 5 years to liquidate that. The no-cost extension that was granted in the use case does not extend the appropriation availability for the original 2017 funding. One more scenario regarding canceling funds and advance payment. In this scenario, the university was granted a no-cost extension to May 31st, 2024 for an award involving canceling funds. There is $100,000 available on the award with $50,000 canceling September 30th, 2023. The university estimates $30,000 of the canceling funds will be spent by the end of September 2023, and that they would like to request an advance payment of the canceling funds prior to the ACMS shutdown, how much should their advance payment be for? Yes, 30,000. Advance payment should be limited to the expected expenditures. Organizations are cautioned against advancing remaining funds simply to expend remaining balances. In some circumstances, it would be appropriate to request an advance payment if there are known expenditures that have been incurred prior to the cancellation. Services performed or supplies received prior to September 30th of the year in question. However, these invoices will be paid by your organization after the cancellation date. However, it is inappropriate to request advance payments of canceling funds simply to allow further expenditures to be incurred after the September 30th cancellation date, even if the project has been extended to permit further use of non-canceling funds. The use of canceling funds for expenditures incurred after the cancellation date is not allowable. In general, advance payments to grantees must be limited to the minimum amounts needed. The timing of advance payments must be in accordance with the actual immediate cash request of the grantee in carrying out the purpose of the approved program or project. The timing, amount of advance payments must be as close as is administratively practical to the actual disbursements by the grantee for direct program or project costs and the proportionate share of any allowable indirect costs. It is important to remember that the process for determining advance timing, the period the advance covers, and amounts requested should be based on a justifiable estimation basis so it can be supported in the event of an audit.
All right, next I'll be covering some updates on our monitoring and reporting activities. I want to expand a little bit on some details surrounding no-cost extensions. It's important to understand that awards with zero remaining balances cannot be extended. It is inappropriate to extend or request a no-cost extension for an award just to use up the remaining funds. There needs to be additional work that is required to be performed on the project. For the first 12-month no-cost extension, a grantee organization is allowed to execute a grantee-approved no-cost extension. And they have the authority to do that as long as they notify NSF at least 10 days prior to the award end date that they are executing that option. Subsequent no-cost extensions or a late first 12-month no-cost extension must be approved by NSF, and in general needs to be submitted at least 45 days prior to the award end date of those subsequent periods. These no-cost extensions may be submitted late, but you'll need to explain why with the justification. As Dorothy had indicated, canceling appropriations do have an impact on no-cost extensions. If all of the remaining funds that are available are impacted by a canceling appropriation, research.gov will block the submission of a no-cost extension. But as she described in that scenario, when there are multiple sources of funding at play, no-cost extensions may get approved, but that does not impact the availability of the appropriation that will be canceling. I want to spend a little time talking about program income. When we stop collecting the annual or the quarterly FFR, we still have a requirement to collect program income. And instead of collecting that on a quarterly basis, we decided to collect it with an annual submission. Currently, we do that with the submission of a program income worksheet, and any institution that had an active award during the prior fiscal year is required to respond. The most recent submission period was for FY 2022. The submission is typically due by November 14th of each year. We go into extensive detail surrounding program income and the logistics of submitting the report in our annual webinar, and we do have a recording available of that webinar on our website if you're interested in viewing that. Program income is gross income earned by the awardee organization that is directly generated by a supported activity by the NSF funding. This includes things such as fees for services performed, the use or rental of real or personal property that is acquired under the grant, or the sale of commodities or other items fabricated under the grant. It could also include license fees. It's important to understand that interest earned on advances of federal funds is not considered program income. Those are handled via a different term and condition. And furthermore, program income does not include any payments that you have received as reimbursement for your award expenses. Each year, we do receive some program income responses that are simply re-reporting the reimbursements that they've received against their award, and that is inappropriate. The standard treatment for program income at NSF is additive, unless otherwise specified in the notice of award. The additive treatment means income earned is to be retained by the grantee and added to the funds committed to the project by NSF, and thus used to further the project objectives. Efforts should be made to avoid having excess program income at the end of the project, even when additive treatment applies. So in general, program income should be expended prior to requesting reimbursement against a grant. However, we understand that that is not always practical in the day-to-day or week-to-week. And so we just ask that you true that up at regular intervals. In certain circumstances, special treatment of program income may be added to the award notice. If the deductive method is added to the award, that means any program income earned must be remitted to NSF by crediting costs otherwise chargeable against the grant. A common example of this is when FL 26, the special term and condition regarding administration of NSF conference or group travel award grant conditions is added to the award. There's a clause that is changed in that special term and condition that changes the treatment of program income from additive to deductive. From November to January each year, NSF conducts a statistically valid random sample selection of grantees that NSF believes may have had expenses incurred but not reported to NSF based on an outstanding award amount. At NSF, for our own annual financial reporting requirement, we are required to accurately reflect expenses at the end of our year, our fiscal year. And so one of the liabilities that we have is any expenses that have been incurred by our grant recipients but not yet reported. And so since we don't have that information at the time we're producing our financial report, we produce an accrual estimate to accurately reflect that on our financial report. As part of our process to validate that, we need to find out how accurately we reflected that accrual. And in order to do that, we need to survey our grant recipients to find out what their cash on hand balance was as of September 30th of the given fiscal year. We will send out email surveys to the ACMS points of contact of the selected institution, and we ask that you provide these responses back to us in a timely fashion. We'll take those responses and we'll extrapolate the results across our population to determine if the grant accrual estimate was accurate. For FY22, I'm pleased to announce that the variance between the validation effort that we did and the actual FY22 quarter four accrual estimate was only 5.1 million or 1.1% variance, which is pretty accurate. Sometimes we receive responses back from folks that are selected in the sample that they don't fully understand what we are asking of them. So I want to define a couple terms here for you. The cash on hand is the organization's cash position relative to all funds received from NSF through September 30th of the year that's being surveyed, minus the costs incurred for the awards through that same period of time. So when calculating cash on hand, the awardee institution must include all expenses that were incurred as of September 30th, regardless of whether you have been reimbursed for those expenses. If NSF was still collecting the quarterly FFR, this figure we are requesting would have been equal to line 10C on the SF 425, as shown here in this graphic. And so what we're basically asking you to do is to complete this top section where you indicate the cash receipts that have been received by your organization for the period, any expenditures or disbursements that you have made, and what that difference is between the two. And this could be a negative cash on hand, which is the majority of the organizations that we work with fall in that category, meaning you're still owed some funds for expenses that have been incurred. It could be a zero cash position, meaning that you've received reimbursement for everything that you've expended. Or you could have a positive cash on hand position, which is less common but can occur for large facilities that may have requested in advance at the end of the year and for expenses that they were going to be paying in the first week of October. Some of the other monitoring activities that we have a responsibility for are covered here in this slide. Within the Division of Financial Management, we have a responsibility for monitoring at the portfolio level. We don't necessarily take a deep dive into a specific award or into a specific institution. That is more in the line of advanced monitoring that is conducted by our sister organization in the Division of Institution and Award Support, as well as the Division of Grants and Agreements. Some of the monitoring that we do involves automated ACMS drawdown screening. We also look for compliance with award administration activities, and we also conduct improper payment transaction testing, which sometimes might feel like an audit, but if your transaction is selected for testing, the only way for us to validate whether the payment was for allowable expenses is to come back to the original source, which would be yourself, and ask for supporting documentation to validate that the expenditures that were reimbursed with a particular payment were actually allocable and allowable for the award. Another important item that we want to just draw your attention to, which hopefully you've heard about in other presentations as well throughout this conference, is the importance of timely project report submission. Our particular division does not have responsibility for the collection of these technical scientific project reports, but it does impact every aspect of NSF when these reports are not being submitted on time. So the specific requirement is that all required reports must be submitted within 1 year of the period of performance end date. This means your annual project reports, the final annual project reports, or the project outcomes report is all submitted on time. Any awards that are closed with unsubmitted reports must be reported to the Federal Awardee Performance Information Integrity System. The lovely acronym is FAPIS. FAPIS records are based on entities, so the award recipients, the college or university level, not the individual PIs. And so since the awards are made to the institution, even if a PI has left your organization, it is still the institution's responsibility to ensure that all required reports are submitted in accordance with the award terms and conditions. If your organization does happen to be reported to FAPIS, that record will remain in the system for 5 years after the reporting time. All federal awarding entities are required to evaluate an entity's record in FAPIS prior to issuing a federal award. So no one really wants to be reported in FAPIS, so don't wait until it's too late. I also like to provide here the specific citation in CFR 200 Uniform Guidance referencing the requirement for closeout here. Next, I want to cover a couple things that we've been doing to innovate how we are doing our monitoring activities. Within our branch, the Payments and Analytics branch, we have been using technology as an accelerator for grants monitoring and oversight. Our primary responsibilities are to manage and process all grant, commercial, and travel payments for the entirety of the agency. But we also have a responsibility for that post-award portfolio level grant financial monitoring. We issue about 11,000 new grant awards per year and have an active portfolio ranging between 45 and 50,000 grants per year. We have a wealth of operational data, and over the past few years, we've been looking at ways to optimize our resource allocation across this broad portfolio. In doing so, we have been shifting away from the use of Excel, Access databases, or CAN system reports to more robotic process automation, custom dashboards, and most recently, AI and machine learning. In the next few slides, I want to take a deeper dive into a specific use case around monitoring spending against the grant and show the evolution of how we applied technology to move from spreadsheets to more of a self-service analytics approach. We've been conducting monitoring on what we have called final unliquidated balances of concern for some time. Our branch sends out email notifications to our awardee institutions if they have awards that are in the final 3 months of their period of performance and have an outstanding balance or a balance remaining greater than 75%. This often indicates that there might be issues with spending or the activity of the grant scope of the project itself. And so we have to ask that question, is an extension needed? Are there other kind of challenges that need to be communicated between the PI and the program official? So we've been doing that for quite some time. What we wanted to look at is how could we modernize our analytics capabilities with this specific use case in mind. So one tool that we have been using is Tableau, which is a business intelligence software that helps users visualize their data and understand the story within their data in new ways. This Burn Rate Explorer that I'm presenting on the screen uses data visualizations to quickly identify grants that are spending differently from their peer group. There's a lot going on here visually, so I'll take some time to unpack what is specifically going on. The purpose of this dashboard is to track unliquidated balances, so those funds remaining that we were just talking about, on NSF grants. So the unit of analysis is a single NSF grant. The centerpiece of the Burn Rate Explorer is a scatter plot, which maps each award based on the time elapsed in the period of performance, which is shown on the horizontal or x-axis, and the funding spent on the grant, which is shown on the vertical or y-axis. We refer to this rate of spending as a burn rate. Each dot represents an NSF grant, with the size of the dot representing the grant dollars and the color representing the type of financial assistance that was provided. So we're starting with about 45 to 50,000 open grants with 13 billion in funds outstanding. As I adjust and apply filters, I can narrow in on specific areas of focus and grants that may be experiencing significant spending delays. In less than 30 seconds, we have identified roughly about 3,000 awards that we can use for additional analysis. These dots along the axis represent grants that have 0 to 1% of their funds expended and are greater than 60% through their period of performance. A new monitoring activity that we've been performing is related to awards that have payment inactivity. We have recently launched a new data monitoring initiative on awards that have not had payment activity for more than 12 months. The NSF CFO has a commitment to enhancing stewardship of NSF funds. As the payments office, we are the front line of supporting this initiative. Our first quarterly notice concerning awards with payment inactivity went out in May of this year and will continue on a standard calendar quarter. Notices will include any award that has had no payment activity for more than 12 months and has more than 5,000 of available funds remaining. We encourage you to reach out to your grant accountant if you have questions, or your program and grant officer if an extension is needed for the particular award. These notifications are intended to advise the staff at the organization and ask them to be liaisons to the PIs to identify what issues might be standing in the way or causing the award to appear to be inactive. This graphic that we show here shows that for our first notification, we had over 1,000 grants that qualified for the notification. It's interesting also to note that 475 of those grants have $0 in ACMS payment activity, and they're considered to be new awards. They're only, they were issued within the last 12 months. We're now going to be available for questions, so we would encourage you to enter your questions in the Q&A, and we will be taking those and answering some of them in the Q&A or answering some of them live.
Okay, thank you, Justin and Dorothy. I see we do have one question. Thank you for answering questions as the presentation has been going on. We did answer a number of them in the Q&A, so you'll see those there. Before we get to that question, you know, in the sessions that we've had this week so far, we've been telling folks, you know, to contact your grants officer, contact the program officer when you have questions. When should folks be contacting DFM? Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
Would you like to take that, Dorothy?
Sure. You should contact DFM as soon as possible if you have any type of question that you need to get assistance with. We'll be happy to talk with you.
And specifically, any questions that are related to the post-award financial process, if you have any issues with the award cash management service, submitting your transaction requests. There are basically, what Jeremy's getting at is there's 3 primary points of contact that you have at NSF for various types of questions that you might have. The main point of contact for scientific or technical questions for the PI is their program officer. Administrative types of questions that are very specific about allowability or rebudgeting or other administrative issues should be directed at your grant official that's designated on the award notice. And then for post-award financial assistance, that would be us. That would be the Division of Financial Management. And general policy questions that aren't related to a specific award, that would be Jeremy's office.
Right. That would be it. You can always send those to policy@nsf.gov. I do see some questions coming in. So Justin and Dorothy, the first one we see here is who will receive underspending notifications?
Yeah, so that last topic with our new notifications, the first notification had actually gone out in May, and then they will follow a quarterly cadence following the calendar quarter. So the next one will go out in July. And these notices, like our other notifications, like the canceling appropriation notifications, as well as awards that have large unliquidated balances near the end of their period of performance, these all go to the ACMS points of contact that are designated by your organization. And because some organizations might have several people designated to be ACMS users, we tend to curate those notices to be going to the latest users or submitters of ACMS transactions. We want to avoid sending the notice out to too many folks at your organization and avoid that bystander effect or the duplication of effort from multiple folks receiving the same notice. And we ask that those ACMS points of contact be that liaison and share that wider or further with stakeholders that are appropriate within their specific organization.
So does that get to the next question there about who to contact with ACMS questions?
That would be actually your assigned portfolio accountant. And we list our assignments on our PAB website. We had provided that link in our presentation, and I had also provided it in the chat so that you could copy and paste it if you would like.
Thank you. Next question is asking if you're using other software in addition to Tableau for portfolio and project management.
So we've been exploring the use of Tableau for data visualization, but we have also been exploring the use of R and Python for other analytical abilities, or data analysis in general. And we've been utilizing and exploring the use of robotic process automation for improving the completion of more tedious or manual tasks that we are required to do on a routine or regular basis. And some other technologies that we've been looking at include distributed ledger technology as well.
Okay, and the next question is asking about FAPIS and SAM, and I think there was a question answered in the Q&A about this, that FAPIS has kind of been subsumed by SAM. So I just wanted to let you know that, and we'll be certainly updating our presentations both. I think we had some information in the award management presentation about FAPIS and also here as well. I see that, Dorothy, you're answering a question about the notifications for the payment management system and ACMS. Perhaps we want to answer that one.
Sure. The question was, are similar notifications planned for PMS? No, we only notify you for grants in ACMS, the NSF grants.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, so I want to thank both Justin and Dorothy for taking the time out today to be here to present and answer questions. So thank you for attending. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.